If you want to be my lover.
No, that's
you
Justin
gotta
Bieber.
get her with my friends.
Friendship lasts forever.
I knew you knew it.
Friendship never ends. If you want to be my lover, you got to give.
Oh my God.
Taking is too easy. That's the way it is. Tell me what you want, what you really, really want.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. I wanna, really want.
What the hell's going on right now?
Gotta give.
See, I knew you knew it. You closet Spice Girls lover. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of I Don't Give a Flick. I am your host, Johnny Blackburn. Alongside me this week, as he is every week, the guy I can't seem to get rid of because he is my roommate.
And I am the one that does the recording, so it'd be quite difficult.
We tried to hire Michael out, but Michael decided he didn't want to do it because he's got too many other things going on.
He's a busy man.
He's a busy guy.
Y'all couldn't afford is what it boils down to.
We really couldn't. I mean, we've greenlit so many other good options.
So many.
With a massive budget that we have that we were just like, you know what, Michael, he's just too expensive. There's no way.
He's too extreme.
Gary Elmore's back. Because
Hello.
he's also one of the hosts of this podcast. Gary, welcome back again.
It's good to be here, Johnny. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank
Neil Riley
you so much.
is Neil Riley's not with us this week because he has better things to do with his time. He just wouldn't tell us what it is.
I find that easy to believe.
Yep. But we also decided to do this episode just a couple hours ago, and he already had other plans. So I don't blame him. I don't blame him for not being here. But that's okay. He's here in spirit, and we love him anyways. And welcoming back to this week's episode, we have the guy you love to hate.
Popping his cherry for the 5th time.
Is it the 5th time at this point? Michael, is this the 5th time that you've been on? 6th time? 4th time? I don't fucking remember.
Like 4th? Yeah, we're going to go with 4th. Let's say 4th.
Okay.
Good number.
We'll say 4th.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Michael, bring in the Payne.
Hello.
It's always funny to see the amount of listeners that drop off as soon as Michael starts talking.
Yeah. That's
You
the story
can
of my
see
life.
those stats. That's awesome. I didn't even know we had that ability.
I'm just kidding, Michael.
Just joking, Michael.
Are you?
Guys, we have a super interesting topic this week because it's something that every single person that's ever watched a movie fears but loves at the same time. We're going to talk about movies you love that you won't admit to loving in public. Basically, guilty pleasures.
You keep
on
them in
this
the
week's
deep,
episode.
dark shadows, never revealing it to
Never
anyone.
talking about it to anyone but your mother or closest relative.
It gets your heart running. You
Gets-
can't admit it.
It gets your blood pumping. Or to
Yeah.
your heart.
Yeah,
It's already pumping.
And away from your heart. Yeah.
And away from your heart. Oh, man. We're going to go over a couple different genres tonight. We're going to hit all the classics from torture porn to romance films to cheesy action movies, musicals, farcical comedies, and movies so bad they're good. Just all the old classics, playing them one after another. They're going to keep on coming. They're never going to stop, and they're going to haunt your dreams.
They'll keep coming back. Oh, yeah. I keep coming back. Oh, I keep coming back to those whirlwind tour of loving and leaving and wanting more. I swear that I swore off.
I don't remember the rest of the lyrics, but Gary does.
I do.
I do.
How do I disconnect?
How do I get the hell out of here?
You can't disconnect because you're in the Matrix. You're in the motherfucking Matrix.
Unfortunately.
Oh, God. All right. I got to ask, and we're going to start with Michael. Michael, why do we love these movies so? Why do we love them so much? Why do we love the movies that the general masses hate? Why is it? Why are they guilty pleasures for us? And this goes for any movie anywhere.
Well,
Why? Why is that?
there's just some movies that I think a lot of it has to do with personalizing the movie for yourself. There's a lot of movies out there that get made that just have very narrow but very deep audiences, as we like to say.
That's a good way to put that, Michael.
Yep. Don't know where I picked that up from, but it's just everyone.
Probably an episode of Star Trek.
Nothing so grandiose. there's just those movies out there that just, for lack of a better term, scratch an itch. That it just
Jesus.
Thank you, Gary. I don't know.
It's 1:30 in the morning, folks. We're delirious already, and we just started the episode.
Yes, Michael. Tell us more about the movies that scratch your proverbial itch, please.
Well, sometimes you just never mind. So there's just
Sorry.
Thank you, Gary. There's just movies out there that I hate you so much, Gary.
And he can't stop thinking about it. That's all he can think about.
Go ahead, Michael, please.
I'm trying. There's just movies out there that they either remind you of something from the past, just make you laugh a lot. Just there's something. It's kind of like having a favorite color. You don't necessarily have to explain to people why a certain color is your favorite color. You just like it. There's something that you're drawn to about it. It's the same thing with bad films, or at least that films that maybe the general audience doesn't like or turned away from. But not everything has to appeal to everybody. Some things can appeal to that small audience and still be great.
Tell that to Disney.
Whoa. Spoiler alert with every Disney film ever made.
Yes.
Go watch a Disney movie if you haven't seen one. I wonder if there's anybody in the history of the world that hasn't seen that's watched films, American films at least, that have not seen a Disney movie or a Disney production. Well, like even like a Pirates of the Caribbean, something Disney has ownership of.
Yeah. I'm sure if you give Disney enough time, they'll own every studio. So eventually.
Oh yeah,
they pretty much do.
Yeah, well, there's that meme about the Republic of Disney where it talks about like over the next century how Disney's going to take over the galaxy.
Yeah,
and that with all the things. So Gary and I were looking this up the other night, and they own Discovery, National Geographic, ESPN,
the
Fox
Federal
now.
Reserve,
Federal Reserve, Area 51, just all these crazy things. But yeah, they just own so many companies now. ABC, and I'm sure there's even more that we're not even thinking of.
And those are just the TV companies. That's not talking about the IP that they own, which is of course all the Disney stuff,
Marvel, Star Wars.
Then they own like tons of real estate. I mean, how many acres is Disneyland?
Disneyland
it's
and Disney
be at least
World.
10.
Yeah, exactly. And then the ones they've gotten in Asia and in Europe. Oh, God, I don't even know.
I'm wondering, because it wasn't that long ago that Disney owned a huge tract of land in Central Texas. I want to say it was a huge chunk of property. Yep. And the rumor was always that they were going to open a Disney Central, right? Because they had an East Coast, a West Coast, and that they wanted one in the center of the country. I don't know if Disney still owns the property or not, or if they ended up selling it off chunk by chunk. But yeah, they owned a very large tract of land out in Central Texas.
Well, if they want to have Disney Central, then they need to open it up near Branson, because that is the jewel of the Midwest.
The jewel of the Midwest, the Broadway of Central America.
Indeedly,
Central continental America, whatever. You know what I mean?
I got you. Yeah.
If they open a Disneyland in like Venezuela, I don't know if
it would be
do
seized
as well
by the government because they're terrible commies.
Come to Disneyland, Venezuela. Eat the mouse.
We cook them any way you want. Fried, boiled, broiled, stewed.
COVID-21. Wonderful.
Jesus.
You've lost.
Anyways, moving on. We've lost half of our listener base. So honestly, I would appreciate that, because the cool thing about
you would appreciate losing?
No. I would appreciate. I would appreciate a Disney Central, because if you look at it, we don't really have any theme parks in Texas that have those virtual interactive rides that we talked about. You go to Six Flags, you go to Schlitterbahn, whatever. All of those theme parks, water parks, they don't really have many of those. I think I went to Six Flags Over Texas like 3 years ago, and they had one interactive ride. And it was a Marvel one.
Where was the one that we went to that had the Terminator?
That was Florida. Oh, that was Disneyland. That was Disneyland. Yeah, in Orlando.
That was not Disneyland. That was Orlando. That
was Universal Studios. I'm sorry. Yeah. But I've been to Disneyland in Orlando as well as Universal Studios, and that's all they have really, basically. Disney World. Sorry. What? No, he's right.
By the way, if you have a chance and it ever opens up again, Diagon Alley is pretty fucking amazing.
God. I was geeking out when we got in there. When we got our wands. Ugh. So cool.
Drinking our butter beer. It was wonderful.
Yeah. And that butterbeer
Jonny
really...
and Gary enjoying butterbeer with their wands out. It's exciting, everyone.
Scratching our proverbial itches.
Scratching that itch.
They did a great job with making butterbeer taste exactly as I imagined it when I was a kid. Yeah,
right. Well, every time I read the Harry Potter books, I was like, I wonder what it tastes like. Oh yeah, that's got to be it.
It looked and tasted just like it should have.
It really did.
Whoever made that recipe, good job.
Yeah, and I'm sure it wasn't much. I mean, it was literally probably a high amount of butter, soda, and then ice cream. And that was it.
I don't know if there's any. Do you put butter in drinks?
I mean, I'm assuming they put some butter in it because it tasted like, I mean, it was frothy and it was fairly thick. Like it tasted like when you eat a dessert and you're like, oh, there's a fair amount of butter in here.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I at least kind of felt that they added in. But
if only we had somebody that had gone to cooking school that could tell us that.
Yeah, maybe. Do we know anyone that went to culinary school at all? Michael, do you know anybody?
No. It's very hard. It's also, number one, that sounds fucking disgusting, whatever that butterbeer bullshit is. Number two,
you'd like it. Get out of
in the book, didn't it have alcohol in it? Like, weren't they literally getting drunk off of that stuff? Wasn't there a scene when they were having to basically carry Hermione back from Hogsmeade because she was too drunk?
Was it butterbeer? I thought it was another.
I watching a different movie? I don't know.
That was fan fiction.
That was a porno.
That was a porno. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, yeah, I think that would be cool if they actually opened one in Texas to give us the experience of having not just roller coasters and extreme slip and slides and stuff. We'd actually have those interactive rides are really cool. Anyways,
but with the Oculus Rift and VR stuff.
Yeah, but that's virtual reality stuff. Yeah. That's not interactive, because with the interactive, it's 4D experiences. But we've talked about that on other episodes, like what 4D offers. And although I would not watch, I think it's general consensus is we would not watch a movie for 2 hours with 4D. But if it was a 5, maybe 10-minute ride, we'd probably do it. Yeah, so I don't know, but Gary, back to the topic. We always do that, but that's why people listen to us. Hopefully, maybe. I don't know. Why do we love the movies that the general masses hate? Gary, what do you think? Why do we not talk about them? Not that we're ashamed to talk about them, but just most people kind of they're depicted in a bad light, or they're just so over the top that people think they're stupid or whatever. Why do we like them?
Well, I think that we've got sort of movies that have, especially the older you get, the more nostalgia value some of them can have to it. And I think that plays a portion of it, because if you go back and watch a movie that you may have liked when you were a kid and you watch it now, you might be like, ooh, this did not hold up well. Yeah. And I'm trying to think of an example of that.
Well, we'll certainly be getting to that. Movies that didn't hold up as well. I mean, oh gosh. I mean, even watching D2 The Mighty Ducks was one of my favorite movies as a kid. And I still liked it as an adult.
But it's not the same.
But it's not the same. And it's not as good. And it was funny, Michael was ragging on me earlier for not putting cheesy sports movies on here, which would have been a good one to add. So I'll briefly go over it, I guess. There are sports movies nowadays. If I listed my top 3, 5, whatever, The Mighty Ducks is not going to be on there. Mm-hmm. But I still liked it when I watched it. It's that same thing you were talking about, Michael. It's that nostalgia factor. It reminds me of a time in my life when, as kids, we would watch those same movies religiously, and we'd rent them from Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, and we'd just watch them over and over again until our eyes bled, or whatever happens to you when you stare at a TV for too long.
They shrivel up and turn into raisins.
That's what happened to me. I'd cry blood.
Yeah. Jeez Louise, Johnny.
That's horrible.
But yeah, I mean, you can either have that nostalgia factor, and back in the day, you used to have fewer critics. So Siskel and Ebert used to be the guys who were they would bless off on a movie if they liked it or not.
And that was it.
Yeah. And nowadays you've really seen a divergence between what critics like and what the audience likes. So you'll see movies that are just these god awful art house pieces that are just and the critics are oh, it's so wonderful, I love it, and the people are this is a terrible movie. So
I appreciate how it's going now. I mean, it's nice that we have, and I'm not just talking about because Rotten Tomatoes seems to be, for a lot of people, not necessarily us, but seems to be for a lot of people, that's kind of the rule you go off of, is based on what reviews they have, and Metacritic. And
Because I can't tell you how many times you've told me your theory on when a movie is going to be good. It's got to hit that sweet spot of like 50 to 70%.
50 to 70%. Yeah. And if it's in the typically the 85, in particular the 85 to 100% range on Rotten Tomatoes, there are certainly a handful of good ones. There are a lot of good ones actually. But for the most part, a lot of them I've always found to be just really, really dull. Yeah. You know, and too artsy, too esoteric almost, you know. And I'm just not a fan. I don't know. Some people, that's their thing. For me personally, it's not. You know, I like, and then so I used to all the time when we'd go to movies, I would read reviews ahead of time, and that really was just such a pitfall. You know, I kind of shot myself in the foot every time because I had these expectations going in, and then it would ruin it. And I've actually found myself recently on some of those Rotten Tomato movies that got the higher scores. I wouldn't know that they were rated that high until after I watched it. I've only been doing that for like the last year, I guess, and not looking at any of the scores. And so nowadays I'm kind of sometimes agreeing with Rotten Tomatoes on their higher scores in the 90% range. Anyways,
what they really need to do is have like you log in or like create your profile or whatever, and you rate movies, and like it compares you to people who rate movies similar to you. So like if somebody doesn't like action movies, they shouldn't be rating or influencing your opinion on whether you think there should be an action movie, you know, if you like them. So then it could match you up to people that have similar tastes. So then you could be like, oh, Fred gave this movie a 92 and we're really compatible. Yeah. You know, maybe I'll go see that movie. It's kind of like that episode of Seinfeld with Elaine. And she buys the little kid like liquor and stuff. But anyway, that's why I think
and I mean, that's
the answer to the question.
That's certainly a thing. So I guess for another question that I'm curious on y'all's take, it's funny you brought that up when we were kids, movies that, you know, we really loved and now we watch them and we want to beat ourselves up kind of thing. What movies did you guys love as kids? I know we kind of touched on it earlier. Kind of sang that song and it was great. We found out Gary was a closet spicy
closet spicy burrito.
What movies did you love as a kid or as an adolescent or a teenager that you just kind of watch now and you're like, what the fuck was I thinking? What was I smoking as a child in the 90s?
Because I knew one Spice Girls song, I become a closet spicy.
Gary, you told us that you didn't know any of them. You claimed you didn't know any of the Spice Girls in general. Yeah. And then you knew the song.
They played it on the radio and like at all the school dances.
That's true.
Just
went to the school dances?
Just ruining my musical movie. That's fine.
Michael, go ahead. Tell us what you think, Michael.
We do this every episode. Why do you keep coming back? I'm surprised. No, Michael, what movie as a kid did you really love that you'd want to kick your own ass for watching all those years ago?
I don't know. So to be honest, like when you're like, oh man, I'm ashamed of my younger self for liking a certain 90s movie. Like, I honestly don't know if there's any movies I like that I'm like ashamed to say that I liked because it's part of who you are. It's part of makes up your character.
Maybe that's the wrong way to describe it then. You know, maybe just more along the lines of a movie when you were younger, you thought was the absolute best film you had ever seen. And nowadays you're like, all right, I mean, it's still enjoyable, but it's obviously not in my upper echelon of top films.
Yeah. Michael's pretty shameless, so it'd be hard to find something.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've got a crap ton of self-confidence when it comes to that. I don't know. Y'all are going to have to go. I'm going to have to think about this for a second.
All right, Gary.
Every movie I've ever seen.
All right.
You know, I don't really know a movie that like I don't like because we were talking about that earlier. Like I can't think of a movie that like I was like I really liked this as a kid.
Okay,
but then I'm like I can't think of an example that I'm turned off of it by now. Because like.
Okay,
I'm pretty much the same person.
I'll go. That's fine. I'll go. Warriors of Virtue was a big one for me. I used to watch the shit out of that. Okay, so Warriors of Virtue.
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, it's one from when was it made?
2013.
No. It was 97. Okay. So Rotten Tomatoes, actually, I'll probably give that to them this one. It was 18% they gave. IMDb was like 4 stars, basically. Essentially, there's this kid who is picked on a lot. The classic, he's picked on in high school. The bullies like knock him into a river or something, and essentially he gets knocked out and travels to this alternate dimension, and he meets these kung fu fighting kangaroos, and he helps them save the world that they live in, for lack of better words. And then he finds himself, and he grows up, and he confronts the bullies at the end and wins. That's the short version of it. Just from explaining it's kung fighting kangaroos, you can probably see that it's just a stupid movie. But I used to watch this movie, like I said, religiously over and over again. Finally, at one point, my mom actually told me that I couldn't rent it after renting it consistently for like a month, because I would watch it, 2 times a day, every single day. And then we just re-rent it when we go to I'd go with my dad at the end of the week, or every 5 days, however long he could rent the videos for. And I just re-rent it again. And so she made me switch. That's probably the biggest one. When I look at other movies like The Big Green, or I look at like Mighty Ducks or Angels in the Outfield, all 3 Mighty Ducks, Home Alone 3, all those movies, Heavyweights, those all come to mind. Those are all, I agree with you, they're still all good. I rewatch them again, and I'm like, okay, I don't like them as much as I did when I was a kid, but I still thoroughly enjoyed checking it out. Like, I didn't regret spending, the hour and a half sitting in front of the TV. So yeah, I'd say Warriors of Virtue, because I've seen it since then again, and that one I was just not into. I was just like, it's the same thing. What's funny, when we saw the remake of Power Rangers, and we're all kind of like, yeah, it was whatever, it wasn't that good. The original was actually better, I still thought, one with Ivan Ooze.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, dude,
that was 95, right?
Something like that, 95 or 94.
I mean, that's still I think a decent movie.
Yeah, it was. And I reviewed that with our other friend Ian Webb on his podcast with Movies So Bad They're Good, and rewatching it again, one of the funny thing, I was actually, when Vanessa and I a long time ago were when we were in Italy, there was one night that she went to bed early, and I was just kind of laying there watching stuff, and I don't know how I got onto it, but I rented that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie, and I just watched it in bed, like just laying there. I just on my iPhone and hanging out in Venice and watching Power Rangers.
Johnny, you're in Venice, like, this beautiful ancient city.
Oh, I did all the sights. It was at night. Everything was closed.
Fucking in your bed, watching Power Rangers, and like the city of Venice and all of its history that's like falling into the ocean is right there. Okay.
Oh, what? We did the gondola rides and we did all that crap. I smell teenagers.
After hearing you talk a little bit about Johnny, one movie that it randomly just popped into my head that I'm like, yep, I used to watch that all the time, and it's a freaking terrible movie. It came out in 92. Do you remember Rodney Dangerfield movie Ladybugs? About like this little girl soccer team? No, it was this little girl soccer team. I used to watch some
sports team. Yeah.
Yes, I used to watch that all the time. It's a terrible movie. Oh God,
really?
Thinking about that now.
He gets no respect. Come on, respect.
12% on Rotten Tomatoes. $15 million budget, made $20 million at the box office. Not bad. Ka-ching. That cheddar make it better. Cheddar make it better.
Probably lost money though with advertising and all that.
You always say that and ruin my vibe, man.
I'm just saying.
Let my vibe ride,
I honestly don't think they spent like $45 million on the advertising of Ladybugs. I'm just going to say.
I thought they only had like a $5 million over the budget.
Maybe.
Okay,
yeah, that's normally. Yeah, that's normally.
Right.
Depending on how large of a film it was. I highly doubt that one had a ton of publicity behind it.
$382 million on marketing.
Yeah, that's what you're reading?
No,
okay.
No.
Is that adjusted for inflation?
No. It's close to $1 billion today.
Okay. No, yeah, that's one that I'm probably not going to check out, Michael. I'm not going to lie.
No, I mean it's really weird because it's like he likes, if I remember it right, it's like he likes one of the moms. So he starts trying to coach the team, but the team is terrible. So he gets this, either his son or some kid as a boy to start dressing up as a girl so he can play on the team. Like it's a really strange movie. Like
super woke.
Yeah, like essentially.
Gary, what name one. You gotta have one as a kid.
I mean, like even like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I still think that's a good movie.
But that's a good movie. No. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking. I mean, come on.
I just always had good taste in movies, Johnny. I don't know what to tell you.
What about Dunstan Checks In? You ever see that one? The kid with the pet orangutan.
You know what? You're right.
That was a horrible movie.
Blank Check. I did like
Blank Check.
Yeah,
bad movie.
I did like Blank Check
Yeah,
as a
me too.
kid. Interestingly, that building, the castle, is in Austin.
They filmed the movie in Austin.
Here.
Yeah. I actually have a friend of mine who actually was in the final casting for the lead role of the kid.
Really?
Yeah. So she didn't get it. They ended up going with some other boy, but I don't know. Oh. Anywho, okay, Blank Check. All right,
Check. Disney movie.
A Disney movie, very good. Michael, what about you? Outside of was it Ladybug's your one or?
Oh yeah, Ladybug's definitely.
Ladybugs. Okay.
It came on TV all the time. Would watch it all the time. Like, I don't know. I liked it as a kid. Now thinking back, I'm like, God damn, that was a terrible movie.
I will say the Operation
Dumbo Drop.
No, that was a good movie though.
Yeah, I liked it. Drop, okay.
Yeah, I don't know what I was saying. Anyway, I don't know.
Operation D-Day. All right, let's jump into the meat of this right now. So, speaking of comedy, let's talk about torture porn films.
Yeah,
those are always funny and uplifting.
Children's shows, torture porn.
Yeah,
the meat of it.
Yes, exactly. Very nice. So a lot of times, and I think it depends on the movie. A lot of times we're kind of the group that we hang out with. You admit what movies you like and why you like them pretty freely.
Yeah.
But I'd say the majority of people out there,
normal people
wouldn't. Sane people,
right,
do not.
Right.
Okay, so
sane people don't do podcasts at 2 a.m.
But
you know what?
It's 1:45, and we're talking about torture porn films. For those of you that aren't familiar, it's not as familiar of a genre. It's a subsect of horror, I suppose, where basically it's in the film they're mutilating essentially human bodies. Very
graphic, very disturbing. Lots of
gore, lots of nudity, stuff like that. So things that would fall into that, you'd have the Saw franchise, you'd have the Human Centipede franchise, anything Eli Roth has directed. There's a lot of stuff. So I'm sure there are some people that just don't have the stomach to watch stuff like that. And I don't blame them. It takes a very sick, perverted mind to be able to sit through a full 2 hours of that sometimes, depending on how graphic it is.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty niche market, but it's a decent sized one because they keep making them over the years.
Very narrow, but deep.
The one that I've always found that people tend to like is the first Saw. That usually gets good reviews from a lot of people. The remake of The Hills Have Eyes typically has a lot of good reviews. The script, I think, with that, the script is strong. It has good production budget. Identifiable characters, whatever. You guys know the whole shebang. But the ones that we don't talk about much, I want to jump into those. So Gary, I'll start with you. Name one or two that kind of jump, or a couple, it doesn't matter, that jump out to you that you wouldn't normally admit if you were sitting around with a group of people.
Ladies, yeah.
It doesn't matter, of ladies, of your family members, of people that you just met or something, and you wouldn't immediately admit to liking that. If they're like, oh, I saw that the other day, and I really thought it was terrible because of X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
But in the back of your mind, you're like, this guy's a freak. Why wouldn't he like it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
For me, the absolute best of torture porn is probably the Human Centipede.
The first one.
Yeah, part 1 and 2.
Part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Each of them, the Human Centipede is the theory behind the movie is basically you
You reap what you sow. We're
You-
full of puns out here on I Don't Give a Flick.
You you have the mouth of one person sutured to the anus of another person, and the alimentary canal just kind of continues on through both people, all three people, or
that's so
multiple
grotesque.
people, and it's really grotesque, but that's the world we live in today. So the human centipede, I think the first one is a much, I don't want to say it's a more possible movie or like grounded movie, but
It's more realistic than some of them. I'd agree with you on that. Yeah.
And
That's saying a lot, but
yeah, because it's about this like German doctor, German of course, who captures these people and turns them into a human centipede. And then in the second movie, which is probably the height of the torture porn,
Sure.
it's black and white, so it's super artsy. And, you know, it's just really creepy and makes you feel uncomfortable to watch torture porn, I think. And
Very true.
I think that's the point. If you don't feel uncomfortable, you probably need to go see a psychiatrist.
Yeah, you probably should be in a mental ward at some point.
Yes.
And I personally, I've never watched for this genre. I've never watched a torture porn film by myself. I typically, I like watching those movies with a friend or multiple people, just because it's fun too. It's like watching a movie so bad it's good, which we'll get to in a second. It's just a great time to just sit there and comment on it the entire time and laugh at it because it's so ridiculous. Like the concept behind most of these films is so ludicrous that you just could not see a normal person or the average person. You couldn't see that coming to fruition. You couldn't see somebody actually going out and doing that. I think for most torture porn movies outside of the ones that actually have a really good story behind it, or that might be considered more straight up horror, you won't see many people like coming up and being like, oh man, Human Centipede 2 or, you know, Green Inferno. Love those movies.
Yeah,
I love watching, you know, cannibals eat someone's tongue, you know. Now granted, I not like I liked Green Inferno. That actually sucked. I'm going to have to agree with you with Human Centipede 2 was probably just because of how ridiculous it is.
Two is definitely the most.
It was entertaining. Yeah. One was, I mean, if you really want to go based off script, one was
a better movie.
Yeah. But I still have to say 2 is just because it's like a human, it's like 30 people or something. He tries to, you know, and then
because in the first one. So to just digress and just explain the story just a second, like in the first one, it's a doctor that's doing this. So he's got like sutures and everything and like an operating table.
Yeah.
And in the second
somewhat believable.
Yeah. In the second one, it's this guy that watched the first movie. So the first movie's part of the world in the second one. And he's like a special needs gentleman, we'll say, an exceptional person.
Right.
And he just kind of is like capturing a bunch of people and stapling roughly their mouths to other people's asses. And it's much more gory and bloody and icky, we'll say.
Absolutely.
Don't watch the third one.
Don't watch the third one, the human caterpillar. Oh God. Jesus.
That's like is that the weird one where it's like the third, it's like somebody's watching a video of it and decides they want to do it or something.
Yeah. That's the second. That's the second one.
The warden at a prison.
Oh, okay. That's the third one. Yeah, that's right. The warden at the prison. Yeah, and actually, it's funny. It's funny. The doctor from the first one is the warden, and his assistant is the main character from the second one.
Yeah,
Jesus.
So yeah, that director just constantly.
I mean, that was a neat way to do that, but it was. Yeah. It's not even worth the watch, and I watch some really crappy things.
Yeah, we enjoy watching horrible films all the time. For me, I would have to say that the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre was awesome, but if you really want to get really into torture porn, the remake, the Jessica Biel remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, does not get as much love as the original. I personally really, really liked it. I thought that the story was pretty strong. I like the bend that they took on Leatherface was a little bit new and a little bit different. And it's that same thing, you know, Saw, out of the Saw series, Saw 1 is great, but my favorite one is still Saw 3 to this day, because you have one guy and he has the option. His son has died, and Jigsaw gives him the opportunity to get even with everybody that was a part of his son's death. And it was an accidental death, but it's the judge, the guy that accidentally fell asleep at the wheel and killed him, the guy who just was a bystander and stood by and didn't do anything. And he chooses to try and save all of them and put his own, regret and his own desires of revenge behind, and just be what we all would strive to be, I think, at that point, even if some of us wouldn't, and then on the other side, you have a really interesting story where they're trying to save Jigsaw's life by taking that doctor, and she's trying to like operate on his brain to try to prolong his life as long as possible. It's just it's two interesting storylines put together, and I really appreciate that in those types of films. But yeah, I would still have to say probably Human Centipede 2 would be the one that I wouldn't talk much about to like groups of people if they
first
were just,
date. Probably not going to mention
probably
that.
Not. Yeah, no.
Have you ever seen?
Michael,
Have you ever seen a Human Centipede 2? It's really great when he's masturbating with sandpaper.
Yeah, see, right there. The scene where the guy masturbates with sandpaper to the movie, that's enough to, if people couldn't watch past that one portion, I don't blame them. It's I won't make fun of you, believe me.
But if you get a second date, they're a keeper.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm still not going to talk about it on any date.
Fair enough.
Ever. Michael, what about you? Which torture porn film is kind of a guilty pleasure for you?
I'm probably going to have to go with Saw 2. Saw 2?
Okay.
Saw 1.
My least favorite.
Pretty decent movie. Saw 1, pretty decent. Yeah. Saw 2, not so decent. It was pretty bad movie. But what's fun is that I want to say it's the most recent Saw movie. Saw 87, whatever it is.
Yeah, Jigsaw was like 4 years ago or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
you saw that. I didn't see that one.
Is that the one that was in the barn?
Yes,
it's like you could just kick your way out of the barn. It's just crappy wood.
Kick out the door. And also, it was the whole point of that one was like there was nothing driving them to the next room. Where it's like,
they could have just stayed there.
And like nothing's going to change. Saw 2 at least corrected that a little bit because they're like, hey, there's a nerve agent that's filling the house, so you got to go find these antidotes. So there's a reason to continue moving on that the most recent one didn't. But what I thought was interesting about Saw 2 was that, it's going through its whole story and all that. I don't want to give a shit about that. What I cared about were the traps and the stuff, the little puzzle boxes and all that stuff that people were going to have to figure out. And some of them were really interesting. And to me, one of the most interesting ones was basically the raccoon trap, because growing up in certain parts of the country, you know what a raccoon trap is. It's when the raccoon sticks their hand in to grab whatever you've placed in there, whether it's a piece of food, or sometimes it'll work if you put shiny metal in there, because raccoons for some reason are attracted to that. When they close their fist around it and they try to pull their hand out, they'll never be able to get their hand out because it's got nails in it and it drags into their hand. But the thing about the raccoon is that it'll never let go of whatever it's grabbed onto. Even if it means certain death, that raccoon is never going to let go. It's just going to sit there until it dies. And so when she walked into the room and there's that trap hanging up there with the antidote inside with the 2 spots for her to raise her hands into, it's like, yep, that's a raccoon trap. And right away, and you just watch her reach in there and you're just cringing the whole time. And yeah, it's great. The other one was the needles in the pit, because there's so many people that are just freaked out by needles in general. And
I'm one of them.
And they're sitting there talking about like, oh, well, we got to figure this out, but we got to do it in time. Like, we're going to have to go through this slowly, blah, blah, blah. And then one dude just grabs the chick and just throws her into the pit.
Throws her in.
It's just like, here you go. And she's like freaking out, and she's trying to find the antidote. And I guess she decides to give up because she just starts basically flailing her arms about inside of the needles. Like as if she's swimming while she's looking for it, just making everything so much worse. And it's just cringy, but the traps are amazing because there's always one part to them that's like, if you just took a second to look at it, like what was fun about the raccoon trap was on the back of the box, there was a key sitting back there. And I don't know if you'd really have to watch to look for it, but there's a key sitting back there. There's, I just grab the key and unlock the box and I can get the antidote out and I'm fine. But because everyone panics and no one takes time to actually evaluate what they're looking at, they get screwed up. So it's just fun watching stupid people, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's I think that's one of the reasons that people love really shitty horror films. You know, not even just torture porn in general. Is people in horror films are always the dumbest characters in any piece of cinema in general.
The best example is that Geico commercial where they're running around like the haunted house or whatever, and they're like, "Where do we hide? Let's hide behind the chainsaws. Why don't we just take the running car?"
Are you kidding? Let's go hide in the graveyard.
Yep.
Oh
and then the Leatherface is there, and he's like, "Oh."
He just rolls that guy that plays that actor, by the way, looks a lot like Tommy Lee Jones. Has anybody ever noticed that? I've always noticed that.
In the Geico commercial?
Yeah, the guy that's supposed to play the serial killer that's standing behind him. He just looks a little like Tommy Lee Jones to me.
I think I know what you're talking about. Like maybe.
Yeah. Anyways, go back and watch it at some point, maybe. Moving on. Movies so bad they're good, and we've discussed this before. Our friend Ian Webb, who hosts the podcast and Facebook group Movies So Bad They're Good, Midnight Cult Classics and Camp. He has actually been on here, and normally his recommendations for movies that week are movies so bad they're good. And we've talked about them briefly before in some episodes. And I think with those types of films, The Room, you know, I guess a lot of people talk about Sharknado. I've never really personally been a huge fan of that one. Those are really the big ones that people just kind of know at this point. Those are the most mainstream ones. So really any pick you could have outside of those that are less well known, I guess, would probably be pretty good. Gary, what would be your guilty pleasure pick for those ones that most people would hate?
I was thinking about it, and this one's not a low budget movie. It was kind of a high budget movie.
Okay.
But I think a lot of people would say that it's not a good movie, but I do like it.
Okay.
It's called Speed, and it's about a bomb on a bus.
Get out of here. No, come on. Seriously.
Yeah, I like that movie.
But Speed is not a movie so bad it's good. Speed is that's a cheesy action film. That's like our next. That's our fifth one.
That's a legitimate action film.
Okay, fine. It's a legitimate action.
But like, I think people, a lot of people don't like that movie.
So
but it's not a movie so bad. What people do you talk to that say they don't like it?
There are plenty of people who don't like Speed.
There's dozens of people across the world, even though I don't know all of them. Can you name one person that doesn't like it?
John
Lovitz?
McFarlane.
John McFarlane, a guy you just made up. Perfect. An imaginary person.
Yep.
He doesn't like Speed.
He hates it.
Gary,
come on, John.
For the people that you say who don't like Speed, what do you think it is about it that they don't like?
That it's kind of just a ridiculous concept for an action movie. Like it just takes place mainly on a bus that can't go under 50 miles an hour.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, I could see that as this is a ridiculous premise.
Yeah,
I could agree with you that there are a good amount of people that may not like that film, but what I have a problem with is your placement of this in our genres today. I don't.
You don't agree with that?
No, but I think it falls more into the action films that we don't talk about enjoying, as opposed to movies so bad they're good that we don't talk about enjoying.
Oh well.
But I mean, hey,
that's going to be my pick for there. Leave me a comment if you disagree or agree with me.
Yeah.
Show me some love.
Show Gary all the love you want to.
Don't forget to smash that like button.
Smash it over and over again. Michael, how about you? Your favorite guilty pleasure movie so bad it's good.
Favorite guilty pleasure movie so bad it's good. A little biography film made in 1981. Little movie called Mommy Dearest.
Yes.
It is absolutely horrible movie. That's just a bad movie. Amazing. What's hilarious about Mommy Dearest is because it's a hilarious film. What's hilarious about it is that it's played so straight by the actors. Like they are dead serious, and they're like, everything that's happening in these situations, it's spot on. This is 100% something that could happen. Except that Faye Dunaway is like a shrieking crazy person the entire time. Everything is just turned up to 11 and just screaming. It's just an hour and a half of screaming, and it's wonderful. And what's fun about Mommy Dearest is that because obviously it's a biography about Joan Crawford, a supposed biography. Originally, it was a book that was penned by Christina Crawford, the adopted one of the adopted children of Joan Crawford, who, after Joan Crawford died, did not leave anything to Christina in the will. And Christina penned this book basically trying to say, hey, she didn't leave me anything, but she was super abusive to me. So I'm going to write this book, and then I'm going to attempt to sue the estate. And yeah, it was a big nightmare. But what's crazy about it, so Joan Crawford died in, this was the 70s, like early 70s. And shortly before she died, she was being interviewed. I want to say by Joan Rivers, of all people. She's being interviewed, and they asked her if anybody ever played you in a biography of your life, who would you want? And she said, oh, no, that wasn't the question. The question was, who is the next Joan Crawford? Who of this next generation of actresses coming up is the next Joan Crawford? Who do you see as you nowadays? And her answer was Faye Dunaway. She honestly thought Faye Dunaway was the most who was like her and had the most talent and blah, blah, blah. So it was really interesting that then Faye Dunaway goes on to play this iconic role of Joan Crawford, of just over the top shrieking. And it's great because most people nowadays, when you talk about Joan Crawford, they don't think of Joan Crawford. They think of Faye Dunaway playing Joan Crawford. That's how crazy big this movie got as far as a cult following goes. And for a really just terrible movie of just screaming and shrieking and beating children with wire hangers and cutting down trees with axes, and it just knocked down that bitch of a bearing wall, just shit like that. Like it's a fantastic, terrible movie, and I love it every time it comes on.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's a Mommy Dearest that's like one of the classic movies. That's actually one of the when I've like out of all my research, that's one of the first movies so bad they're good. Like that's kind of like, you know, outside of that and oh god, what's it from? Outer Space 9. What was that thing called? Plan 9 from Outer Space. Yeah. Plan 9 from Outer Space. The one from 59 that they always claim kind of started it all.
With Ed Wood.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was an Ed Wood film. For me, God, it's hard with this one. And this is the same type of genre that kind of goes along with torture porn, where it's one of those genres that it's really great to sit in a group of people and watch it with your friends, because it's a lot of fun to make fun of them.
Right.
All right. If I'm going to go off Gary's format, and we'd go off, I would say Face Off would be mine if I'm going to go off.
Okay.
This I would still kind of put that in cheesy action films, but mine would certainly be Face Off. I've probably seen that one 20 something times over the course of my life.
It doesn't need to have a low budget to be so bad it's good.
I know, but movies so bad they're good. But see, I think Speed's just a good movie. I don't. I
like Speed 2.
I wouldn't consider it. Well, Speed 2 is different.
Cruise control.
Cruise control. Watch this iceberg float at a mile a day.
William Dafoe was in that.
You always forget that, but he's there.
I always forget that he's there.
Mine would actually be. I've actually met a fair amount of people over the years that have. I met a fair amount of people this year that actually are not fans of Miami Connection. And that was one that we had reviewed for Ian's podcast. Because it's just like any of these films, same as like the big ones like Samurai Cop or Birdemic or The Room or whatever. It doesn't really have a coherent storyline. You can't.
Great music though.
Great music. Oh my God. Sound Dragon is fantastic.
Dragon Sound.
No, Dragon Sound was the one that I said would have been a better name. Remember Sound Dragon?
I think it was I think they're called Dragon Sound because that's not as good as Sound Dragon.
That's right. Okay, then there you go. It's the other way around. Yeah. And basically, there's these scenes where the band. So the
scenes. It's a music video.
It's a music video basically for this band where only one guy knows how to play an instrument.
And a full music video, by the way. It's not it's not like in a movie where you have like a montage or anything. Yeah. It's just a music video.
It's them literally playing the wrong chords and not knowing how to strum guitars or play the drums correctly.
Together through thick and thin.
I don't remember the rest, but
we'll play to win. Something like that.
But yeah, for me, it would be Miami Connection. I know there's a fair amount of people out there that did enjoy it, but there's also good collection of folks that didn't. Another one that I would throw in there, which I know a lot of people fucking hated this one, and I did hate it. It was stupid as hell, but I still enjoyed watching it. And it was called Ouija Shark. And it was recently made, and it's a horror. It's probably it's definitely my top 5 of just the worst movies ever made. It's up there with White Cobra versus Diamond Fox and the Deathbed, the bed that eats people. Monos.
Hands of Fate,
just all these horrible films. But the one about Ouija Shark is, and I talked about this on Ian's podcast, they all got mad at me for suggesting it, and I agreed with them. I was like, this should not be made or celebrated, but at the same time, it's just so fucking dumb and so goddamn entertaining. I can't explain it. Also, I've never seen a non-pornographic film with that many large busty women in one cast, and that was also cool. Okay, that was cool, and none of them were really that attractive either. They're okay, hopefully they never listen to this episode, but if they do, I'm sure they have wonderful personalities and all that.
Jesus Christ,
and they got big tracts of land, so it's great. But honest to God, that one is certainly up there as well. I would not admit to folks in that group, the movie So Bad They're Good community, that's one of the ones I enjoyed watching. Even though
hopefully none of them listen to this podcast.
I'm sure some of them do.
I'm sure they do too. You're about to be banned from that Facebook group. I hope you know that.
I highly doubt that, but we'll see. Maybe. So let's move on. Comedies. Okay. Comedies, farcical satires, parodies, whatever. Ones that most people would just ones most people would not agree that they enjoyed, even though some people do. God, I mean, for me, there's just so many of them. Really, all of the bad, and I'll go back to the old Adam Sandler movies, or excuse me, the new Adam Sandler movies. That's My Boy, the one he had with Andy Samberg. We talked about for those of you listening, when this comes out, this will be the episode before this one, where he's sexually assaulted by his teacher, and she gets pregnant when he's like 13, I think. Adam Sandler's 13, 14, I don't know. Shut up. And Vanilla Ice is in it, and it's really fucking stupid. And I just know so many people that put that one on the level of Jack and Jill and The Cobbler and a bunch of his other films. The Hot Chick. I loved The Hot Chick back in the day with Rob Schneider. It was when he did that, Deuce Bigelow, and The Animal, all in subsequent years.
All within like 6 weeks.
Probably. It seemed like it. But it was like him and Anna Faris and just some other small time players at the time. And that one, I've seen it on TV a couple times since then, and I'll still sit down and watch it.
All right.
It's a horribly delicious piece of trash. Love it. Would still see it to this day. I don't know. This is one of my favorite ones, because the comedy genre itself, there's so many that fall into this. There's a lot of great farcical comedy movies, like the first Scary Movie and Scary Movie 2 are both really good, actually. And then you get into Scary Movies 3 through 5 or 6. Yeah, however many they've made at this point, which are all crap. Yeah. But I'm sure there's still a handful of people out there that it's a guilty pleasure for them, that they love all of them. Gary, where are you at? What comedies did you have on your list?
So for satirical, and it may just because a lot of people haven't seen this or don't like British kind of humor. Okay. But I put Monty Python's The Meaning of Life for mine. Which
I guess that one, it didn't have quite the rep that Life of Brian or Holy Grail did.
Yeah, Holy Grail I think is their most famous popular one.
Sure.
The Meaning of Life is also, I think, a really interesting one, because it just kind of it's Monty Python, so it's a very unique sense of humor that those gentlemen had, and it's basically just about the stupid stuff that we go through in life every day. But there's this one scene where this guy's in probably the most famous scene in the film, where there's this really fat guy. I can't remember which of the Monty Python guys plays him, but he's in like a gigantic fat guy suit, and he goes into this really nice restaurant, And, he's wearing a tuxedo and John Cleese is the waiter. And, he's like, can I take your order, sir? And he like brings him all this food. And like, the fat guy just keeps vomiting it up because he just can't eat that much. It's just like all over him. He's just covered in vomit. Jesus. And then at the end of the dinner, he's like, I'm so full. And John Cleese is like, would you like a dinner mint? It's only half a thin. And so he feeds him a dinner mint and the guy just explodes and like all of his guts just cover everybody in the fucking this fancy restaurant. And he's just like, you can see like his insides and his skeleton and everything. And,
jeez.
So it may not be humor for everyone, but I think the meaning of life is a real fun one. Plus, it's got a great song in it, which is the one that's like, just remember that you're standing on a planet that's evolving and revolving at 900 miles an hour. Check it out, kids, if you haven't seen it. It's really good.
Really good. I'll take your word for it. Michael, how about you?
My comedy is going to be a 1995 film. The last film, actually, unless he decides to direct another one, which I somehow doubt he's going to. Last film directed by Mel Brooks was Dracula, Dead and Loving It, starring, it's a Leslie Nielsen movie. Just a fantastic movie. I used to watch it all the time, especially like around 98, 99. For some reason, I was really obsessed with this movie, but it's just got a lot of just tongue-in-cheek, fun, slapstick comedy, and just that playing with the idea of Dracula, this horrific character that is just fucking falls all over himself and it's just being stupid. Interestingly enough, it's kind of strange, but there's multiple actors in this movie that actually, do y'all remember the TV show Wings?
Yep.
Yeah, of course.
For some reason, there's multiple actors in this. Like, I want to say Peter McNichol played in Wings, at least a couple of episodes of it, but like Steven Weber and like Amy Yasbeck, like they were all these people from Wings that for some reason ended up in this movie that I'm not 100% sure how it happened, but they did. But yeah, it's kind of out there. And what's interesting is that it follows more closely the 1931 Dracula story than it does the Bram Stoker Dracula. So I think a lot of people were kind of turned off just because one, it was a Leslie Nielsen movie, but two, it didn't necessarily follow the original story all that close, but it was just fun and a lot of little Mel Brooks style humor, Mel Brooks style jokes that are in there that just kind of make you giggle. And
Lucy, not
a lot of people liked it. But just
how much more blood can there be?
I remember laughing so hard that we had to pause the movie and just like laugh for 10 minutes straight. It was like, just try to step back and hide behind the pillars as he goes, and Harker goes and taps the stake in the vampire's chest and blood is just spewing everywhere. And Mel Brooks is just, we should have put newspaper down. Like, it's so stupid, but it's wonderful.
I miss back in the day when we had these spoofs or these farcicals that
back when we had comedy.
Just really, back when comedy was actually,
when people could be funny
all the time, and it was written well, and you saw, I guess what, for lack of better words, potty humor jokes that were actually done well consistently between films. I know there were obviously a number that weren't done well. I don't know. You don't see it as much, I mean, like I'm trying to think of comedies that I've seen over the last, like actual comedies that I've seen over the last decade that I thoroughly loved. I mean, Spy, The Big Love. I mean, those are really the only two that I could pick that I'd be like, okay, those would be in my top 25 of all time. And then the rest of them are pre-2000 for the most part, pre-2005, I guess. I add another one. I'm just curious what you guys thought. Anchorman 2, not a good movie, but I was watching it on TV today, actually, rewatching it. And I liked it. There was a lot of stuff that I forgot that it had, and maybe when I saw it in theaters, it had been over a decade since I made the first one, and my expectations were too high. And then after seeing it, it's one of those movies you go back and watch a second or third time, and you're like, okay, this was actually better than I recall.
Yeah, because it just has such high expectations. It'd be like if they tried to make a Dodgeball 2.
Right.
It just it couldn't
Yeah,
live
that's a
up
good
to
example.
that.
And I always thought the problem with Anchorman 2 was that it was so self-referencing that the only way to really appreciate Anchorman 2 was to see Anchorman.
Right.
Or I guess Anchorman in general, but it's always tough for me to say, yeah, that's a great movie, when in order to enjoy that movie, you have to watch a movie that preceded it.
I think that's a really good point. I think that's why a lot of people had said, I didn't care for it necessarily because either A, they didn't see the first one, or B, they were expecting it to be exactly like the first one. And it wasn't like the first one, but same thing. There were so many references from that first one. Yeah, you had to see it to fully enjoy that portion.
I mean, it's interesting because comedy nowadays is almost entirely self-referential. Like you look at like Family Guy. Like all it does is
it's all pop culture references.
Yeah.
Right.
And reference previous episodes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the best episodes, or at least one of the best examples of self-referencing humor that I can think of that I think really starts to pay off are mostly in sitcoms, but the one particular is Archer. Because Archer is one of those things that the first few episodes you start watching, you're like, who the hell are these characters and what's happening? And they'll make these one little just off the cuff remarks. Like I'm trying to remember one of the seasons when Cheryl or Carol kept saying, just like that old gypsy woman said. And at first you're like, okay. But then by the third time they say it, like 6 episodes later, you think it's just the funniest thing in the world. And then in the last episode of the season, when one of the guys is like, was crushed to death by is drowning to death while also crushed by a soda pop machine. He's like, God, drowning while crushed by a soda pop machine. Oh my God, it's just like that old gypsy woman said. Like, it's just the self-referencing humor throughout the entire thing. I think for sitcoms works. I think for movies, it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. So switching gears, let's jump into romance films, and these can be anything from paranormal romances to
Casper.
Casper.
I got Casper in my clothes.
To rom-coms, to over the top, super gushy, romance films. Michael, let's start this one with you. What's one that most people hate and rag on that you actually really love?
Oh, and Michael, give us the defining line of the movie before you tell us what it is. I'd like to try and guess it.
I don't think is there
the most famous quote from it
in this movie?
I don't know what your movie is.
Yeah, I don't know what your movie is either.
Is it Love Means Never Having to Say You're Sorry?
Oh, I see what you're saying. How like all the romance movies have like a quote or a saying, like, I wanted it to be you. Right. I always wanted it to be you. Let me think. I got to think about this. Go to Gary. We'll see if we can guess it.
All right, we'll jump to Gary. We'll let Gary go first.
Okay.
Go ahead, Gary.
Well,
you don't say speed.
Okay. My guilty pleasure romance film is You've Got Mail. I know it's a popular movie that people like.
Yeah, that's a really popular movie that people like. It's a great movie.
Yes, but it's a guilty pleasure for me because I love watching it. I can quote the whole thing.
Okay. Why is it guilty though?
Because
why do you feel guilty when watching it?
Because I want Meg Ryan to be mine, and she ends up with Tom Hanks. It's very unfortunate.
I don't. Okay. All right.
And because a guilty pleasure is something you do that makes you feel good.
Right, but the meaning of it is it makes you feel guilty, like you feel guilty for watching it. You feel like you shouldn't be watching it. Do you feel when you watch You've Got Mail like you shouldn't be viewing that film? I don't think you do. I think you're just picking your favorite romance.
I can't say yes to that, but it's a guilty pleasure because it's something you do to make yourself feel better.
That's a pleasure. That's not a guilty pleasure.
That's a guilty pleasure.
No, if it was that, then guilty would not be in the name.
Yeah, Michael, weigh in on this.
This is the same thing with speed, Gary.
This is Michael. What is a guilty pleasure?
You're making your own episode. God damn it!
A guilty pleasure.
What's the worst thing is he does the editing, so I can't.
Don't want other people to know you enjoy it.
Exactly.
Right. So why are we making a podcast about our guilty pleasures?
Boom.
Right.
Because it's fun. It's fun to to tell people about that.
like
It's something that they wouldn't know normally if they know us.
A guilty pleasure is you just break up and you go get a pint of ice cream and you eat it on your couch, right? You've Got Mail is my pint of ice cream.
No, okay. Okay, so here's the dictionary definition of guilty pleasure. Okay? Something such as a movie, television program, or piece of music.
Movie, boom.
Okay, it's fine. That one enjoys despite feeling that it is not generally held in high regard. So you don't feel that You've Got Mail is held in high regard by most people?
High regard. Okay.
Really?
You've Got Mail?
You don't think it's held in high regard?
No, I think it is held in high regard.
Then it wouldn't be a guilty pleasure.
Well, I was operating off of a different definition of guilty pleasure.
You normally do, so that's fine. Whatever, Gary. I can't kick him off the podcast.
I can't quit you.
Can't quit me. God damn it, Gary.
Well, Johnny, what's your guilty pleasure romance? You tell me what this is.
I thought we defined this with speed.
God damn this episode.
God damn it. Oh, Jesus. All right. Fuck. Honestly, I've always felt this with. All right, this is one I'm legitimately ashamed to admit, but I do like J-Lo rom-coms.
Oh no.
I do like Jennifer Lopez. I know, Michael, I know. Okay. I do. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's wrong with me. I should see his fucking psychiatrist. I don't know what's wrong with me.
No.
She's not a good actress. They're always over the top, and she's always a super. Oh God, you want to talk about self-reference? It's just I don't know. Okay, so
now, Johnny, I know a lot of times you say things just to be controversial. Is this one of those times? Do you actually like J-Lo movies?
Yeah, I do like J-Lo.
Geely?
Geely is an exception. Geely I do not like.
Geely.
You remember what episode did we talk about that one? Was it
worst movies ever made?
I think it was like worst movies ever made. That is in general one of the worst movies. I think films that have actors explode with a level of emotion that is not warranted from the line given before they explode with that emotion.
Like the entirety of the room?
Yeah. Or like, what was the one, not Striptease, the one that we watched.
Oh, yeah, about the strippers.
The Paul Overhaven one. Oh, gosh, with the chick from, with the woman from Saved by the Bell. How am I forgetting this? I'm gonna look it up. Hang on. Somebody say something. Somebody talk. Somebody talk. Somebody talk. Somebody talk about things.
I turn on my computer.
And the sound of Showgirls.
Okay.
Showgirls is what I was talking about. Okay. But that's what Geely has. Geely has that with J-Lo's character the entire time. She's supposed to play this really badass assassin, essentially, or a hit woman that goes in and just takes care of business no matter what. And not one point in the movie is she intense or not, not one time is she like badass. She doesn't make you fear her. She's not intimidating at all. Ben Affleck's performance is horrible. It's awful. But that's not one of the ones that I'm talking about. I'm talking about like I'm talking about Monster-in-Law, The Wedding Planner, Made in Manhattan. Those are all, we talked about good rom-coms, good rom-coms, which You've Got Mail is a good rom-com.
I agree. It's a guilty pleasure,
It's
Mark.
not a guilty pleasure. It's not what the definition is. Damn it, Gary.
It's an innocent pleasure.
An innocent pleasure. Maybe an innocent pleasure. That's a different episode,
that sounds worse than guilty pleasure somehow. I don't know why.
Pleasure.
But it's just an innocent pleasure. I mean, that sounds like something like a 19th century British guy would say. Never mind. Won't go there. Very Oscar Wilde. We'll just put it there.
A lot of the one thing that you get with a lot of Jennifer Lopez, those rom-coms, is the stories, especially when they were made. A lot of people considered them to be like outdated and patronizing almost. And the script is just always horrible. The script is to the level, if you ever watched the Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen movies when you were younger.
Drugged up in Vegas.
Yeah, probably. That's probably one of their later ones when they were in their 20s.
Hanging with the Bush twins.
My cousins and I used to watch their not like It Takes Two or like the good ones. They had some really good ones when they were younger and like their adolescent years. But when they became teenagers, they started making these really bad teen flicks, I guess you would call them. There was one line from one of them where the guy, he looks at, I think he's Mary Kate Olsen, and he's like, "Did anyone ever tell you that I'm about to kiss you?" And that was the line. That was the one line from the movie I remember, but my cousin and I just started laughing our asses off because it was just so horrible. And that was actually when I started watching those movies so bad.
Yeah.
Well, were just so bad they were bad. But it was fun to watch. That's the first time I realized this is awesome to watch with a group of people and just make fun of it the entire time. The person who wrote the dialogue for those Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen movies, I guarantee you wrote the dialogue for all of J-Lo's rom-coms because there's not much difference. They're all just super in your face, on the nose. There's no witty plugs here and there to lead you to a bigger surprise ending. You know what's going to happen at the end of it early on.
But just needed M. Night Shyamalan to come in there.
Yeah, it needs that twist.
I think both of the Olsen twins are billionaires, though.
They are.
They've got that going.
It doesn't. Okay,
at least
that's true.
They are.
That's right. Tommy
Wiseau's
probably.
I don't know. I would have difficulty believing they're billionaires, but maybe not. I mean, it's all the fashion stuff that they've gotten into makes a crap.
Oh yeah,
money.
It's their clothing brands at this point. I guarantee you, all the businesses they own. But it's that same. It's that same thing with a guy like Tommy Wiseau or something. I'm sure he's probably worth over $1 million at this point. With his old entrepreneur endeavors and his current luck with the Disaster Artist and all of the screenings of The Room and whatever. Just because they're rich doesn't mean they should be making films. It doesn't mean that, right. But with romance movies, the draw of that is it's the same thing we talk about with a good script, to humanize the characters, to make them relatable, to the point you love, like Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks, because you could envision yourself being Tom Hanks and realistically maybe going after someone like that. But it's still,
they're my innocent pleasure. What can I tell you?
It's there's a whimsical, fantastical sense to it, with the, I don't know, with the J-Lo stuff, it's all very superficial. And it's all just like two really good looking people. One of them is rich and the other one is lower socioeconomical class.
It's
but somehow they find a way
work out in real life. Yeah.
And there's not the journey that they take to meet at the end. It doesn't really have the hardships and the tribulations you might face in real life to get there, which would make it a good script. So it's not. I mean, and I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about those. Maybe it's that kind of the same thing. It's the so bad they're good feel, and I'm just a sucker for those type of movies. I don't know, but those would be mine. Those three in particular. I am. Not like I've seen all of them a bunch, only like 20 times each.
Oh, okay. So, that's that's a normal amount to see Geely. That's cool.
Not Geely. Geely's not in there. I'm gonna kill you. I hate you.
Michael,
I won't be your friend anymore.
What's your guilty, dirty pleasure romance movie?
I'm done. I'm done with this episode. I'm done. Gary, you take over the episode. It'll be innocent pleasures.
Tell me about your innocent pleasures, Michael.
Tell me about the proverbial itches that you like to scratch.
Jesus Christ.
If you've made it this far in the episode, good job.
Yep, and I'm sorry. So that's my guilty pleasure romance movie, 1997, The Beautician and the Beast. Like, it's a fucking terrible movie, right? Just right off the bat, it's not a good movie. Yeah. It's essentially The Nanny in Eastern Europe. Got Fran Drescher and Timothy Dalton in it, and I assume they got Timothy Dalton because Charles Shaughnessy was like, "I'm not doing that." But it's The Nanny in Eastern Europe. There's really no other way to put it. But it was 97. The Nanny, I want to say, ended in around the same time. Maybe it didn't, like 96, maybe even later than that. But anyway, Fran Drescher was really well known at the time. I want to say this is probably like one of the only movies she ever tried to make. I guess the rest of the stuff you never heard of or was just done in deep dark circles somewhere. But The fun part about The Beautician and the Beast was that it's kind of that play on democracy of the West versus communism of the East, and them coming together and how they clash. But I always like the line from it when they first get off the little plane or whatever in the country, and one of them is trying to make light of the situation. It's like, oh, it's like Paris 50 years ago. The other one's like, yeah, there were Nazis in Paris 50 years ago. Like, it's just a fun little stupid movie that reminds me of my childhood. And I remember Mom used to watch it all the time when it came on TV. So I'd sit there and watch it with her.
I remember that line in it when he's making a sandwich and he's got the Miracle Whip or mayonnaise or whatever. And she's like, just remember, you're entering those dangerous heart attack years. I do a terrible Fran Dresser, by the way. But it's okay. And he's like, no, I cannot enjoy.
I cannot enjoy. Yeah. So he's got 3 kids. It's the son and the 2 daughters, and there's the older, prettier daughter in the middle, not so pretty daughter, and then the younger kid. I remember he's talking to the middle, not so pretty daughter, and right when she's about to leave the country, and she tells her, she's like, you remember what I told you? The little girl's like, yeah, boys will like me for who I am. A princess with a great big dowry.
Yeah.
What's crazy about the movie too is, the director probably should have spent more time on the film and less time on this, but he actually worked for several months with like a linguist / dialect coach to create the fucking fictional language that they used in the movie. Like months they worked on creating a fictional language that they use a handful of times in the movie instead of actually focusing on the movie itself.
They should not have done anything different in that movie, because it is an innocent pleasure, Michael.
It's just my innocent pleasure. There you go.
Just the innocent pleasures that you keep to yourself and don't discuss with anybody.
That should be the title of your next album, Michael. My Innocent Pleasures.
That'll sell like hot.
What was the title of your first album? Your initial album?
Innocent Pleasures, the monotone drolls of Michael Payne. Wonderful.
Singing Spice Girl songs.
Yeah.
Just with a banjo.
Tell me what you want.
Just tell me what you want, what you really want. Jesus.
Okay, I think that's everybody's romance film.
Okay. All right. Okay. Action films. There's a lot to pick from this one. There's a lot of cheesy action films that we love, that some of them are even horrible, and I'm just going to start off, and I'm going to give another one, but I am going to start off with Face Off. And I know that Face Off gets a lot of heat from a lot of people. We've actually discussed this on the podcast. Jacob and Ian were talking about how dumb it was.
But a lot of people like Face Off.
A lot of people do like Face Off, but there's a lot of people that hate it because they thought the character of Nicolas Cage, I can't remember his name, was too zany and over the top.
It's Nicolas Cage. He can't control his rage.
That's true, because he's Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
Damn. Love how that rhymes. You just walked right into that one.
So you get to use Face Off, but I don't get to use Speed. Okay, I see how it is.
No. I'm not using Face Off for the movie so bad they're good.
Okay.
I'm using it for action films. I said if we were following your format, then I would go ahead and use Face Off because you use Speed in the incorrect genre top. But okay. Whatever. I do hear people talk about that one. And honestly, I never thought about Face Off. I never thought about it being a bad film because I used to watch it a bunch as a kid. And as a kid, you don't really realize you're watching a movie that some people might think is stupid, and just kind of too zany. But see, I don't see why action films can't be zany. I don't see why they can't have over. I mean, like Super Mario Brothers. That's another one that I hear a lot of people hate on.
Great movie.
And that's a great movie. I know it's a video game film, but I'd say that's a good mix between action and what else would you categorize that as?
Bob Hoskins is definitely an action star.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When I think Bob Hoskins, when I think of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I think of action. But Dennis Hopper, it's that same thing you talked about Speed. You have that, and he toned it down for that, of course. But you talk about a guy that's known for playing those over the top, really kind of zany comical villains, and he did so playing Koopa. God, man, there's so many good ones. I'm gonna come back to me because I do feel like there's some others I should touch on. But Gary, let's go to you. As far as action films go, which ones do you love that are not innocent pleasures, guilty pleasures?
Okay, so these are cheesy action films, right?
Whatever, or action films people just think are bad and dumb and that you would not normally admit to.
I had two on my list. One of them was Roadhouse, which is Roadhouse, which is
it's a good movie.
It's a good movie.
I agree with you. It's a good movie.
It's got a lot of good,
stupid, but
good lines to it.
Yeah, it does.
Just because it's just a lot of fun. And then then the other one I had was Robin Hood Men in Tights. It's not really a super actiony movie, but there are the swordplay aspects to it and the archery aspects to it.
Yeah.
But another Mel Brooks movie. What?
That's a wonderful action film, Gary.
I would say comedy on that one too, but I see where you're coming from.
Yeah. Okay.
To speak to your point though, that is one that I do actually hear a lot of people saying is not one of their favorite Mel Brooks films, and I really never got that because we're men in tights, we're men in, and it's just
when he's doing the he and the princess are Maid Marian are behind the sheet and the lights shining on, and it's kind of like the shadow things, and his scabbard comes up like his.
He pulls up the dress and she's got like the full ironclad. Whatever the hell it's called.
The chastity belt.
Chastity belt. Thank you.
Call a locksmith.
Call a locksmith.
The happy little birdie made a happy little doo-doo.
Before you do it, you must go through it, or else I blew it.
It's kind of like with Mel Brooks films, it's kind of like Tarantino almost. Like finding a bad one is hard. His weakest ones, you're like, oh, it's not that great, but it's still a good movie.
Yeah,
we talked about Hateful Eight or oh god, what else? Jackie
Mel
Brown.
Brooks and Tarantino should team up to make a movie.
I don't actually know if that would be very good. I feel like there would just be two conflicting ideologies and styles into one film. I just don't. Yeah. I don't see how that would work.
They should be interesting. Trade off and direct every other scene.
Oh my god, no! We talked about this in our 2 episodes ago. We talked about A-listers and we talked about having too many directing styles in one film. I don't know. Maybe. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. What was your first one again?
Roadhouse.
Yeah, God, I love Roadhouse. But Gary and I were talking about that earlier before you got on, and he was asking me why I thought it was just a bad movie in general. And yeah, I don't know. What did you think? Because I guess my reasoning was, we talked about the main character who drives the story.
Yeah.
We talk about he's went to Harvard and he gave it all up for the life of using sage wisdom and Eastern philosophy and meditation, and but then he uses that to go and
kick
essentially be an enforcer.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he runs the security of the club, but he's still an enforcer and he still has to use violence. But he went to Harvard. They never explain, they never really go too deep into it. They mention that many times, but they never go below the surface on it. They never talk about it.
I just love when he goes into the clinic the first time and he's got his own charts with him. He's like, here, I was hit here and here, so just add these on.
I mean, I think I saw Roadhouse once. Maybe once. It wasn't that long ago, but I saw it once because he's like the security with the different clubs, and he gets hired to go to the one club that they're having all the problems, and he lives in the barn, right? Like the little
he prefers his
right.
He prefers a secluded lifestyle.
Yeah, he's actually got a really nice setup there because I think the farmer that he rented the barn from was charging him like $100 or something a month,
and becoming his friend too.
Yeah. But it's a giant pad that he's living in. It's got a great view of this lake, and it's a beautiful place to live.
Yeah.
So
right,
but
and it's right across the way from the main antagonist of the film.
Right. So they're right next door to each other. Neighbors.
I mean, it wasn't a great movie.
It's not.
Would I call it bad?
It's entertaining.
Although I guess to be fair, I saw it once and there's not a hell of a lot I remember about it. So maybe that tells you enough, because I don't remember anything about him going to Harvard or being like some kind of Eastern philosophy mystic, like he's suddenly Doctor Strange or something. But
no, he's not a mystic, but he's always doing just him instead of Benedict Cumberbatch.
Oh, jeez.
No, but there's a lot of points where he's meditating or practicing Tai Chi in the mornings, or
wasn't that like him trying to control his rage, or else he was going to kill people? Like maybe I saw a different movie. I thought he was.
I don't remember
because
that.
He was afraid he was going to kill people, and I don't know.
He had a point in the film. To your point, he had a point where they do talk about his background, where he was still being an enforcer after graduating from college and stuff, where he accidentally killed a guy that was drunk and causing stuff in the bar. The guy, I think he pulled out a knife or a gun or some type of weapon, and he was defending himself, and he
rips his throat out.
Yeah. Well, he ripped the other guy's throat out, and that scene was really cheesy how he did it. But hey, man, look, Roadhouse, it influenced an entire generation of action films. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's certainly an influential film, and I've certainly enjoyed watching it.
Okay.
So I am there with you. It's not one I'll walk around telling people like, oh man, that's one that I would pick is fucking Roadhouse. But it was entertaining.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Still trying to wrap my head around the Robin Hood Men in Tights one, but.
Okay. It's an action film. Cary Elwes is an action star. He was also in Saw, the first Saw.
He was.
So he's come up twice tonight.
That is true.
He has. I wouldn't get an action. Did you say you consider Cary Elwes an action star?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
It's like,
no.
I mean, it's like, there's action in Princess Bride, but it's a comedy romance, I guess. I guess it's a rom-com kind of period piece also. There's so many. There's so many.
Worth the noise.
Indubitably, I do not think you know what it does not mean what you think it means. Okay, Michael, what about you? What action movie or movies kind of pop in your head that you wouldn't admit to somebody on a first date that you enjoyed?
Cheesy action movie. I'm gonna go with, what was it, 2002 Resident Evil. The first one.
Okay.
Like it didn't. There's a lot of people, especially our generation, that like it, right? And I think it's probably because of the nostalgia factor. At the time it came out, it made money, but I don't think a lot of people liked it.
The video games, did they come out simultaneously? Like were they around?
No, they came out before.
Okay, it did. Okay.
I think the first one was 96 or 7.
Was it? Okay. I didn't play them.
They're famous for having awful controls.
Oh yeah.
Like it's so hard to control your character.
Real bad.
You're all going to die down here.
And Resident Evil's also because they've spoofed it a lot, but it's real famous for the stupid laser hallway scene when it's like, oh, got to dodge the lasers that are coming down the hallway, and the one guy dodges them like 2 or 3 times, and then somehow the computer's like, oh, I got to get this asshole. And so instead of just having a line, it fills the entire hallway with like a cross section of lasers to cut him into little pieces. Like it's just a crazy movie. Mila Jovovich is in it, which you get to see her side boob, which made a lot of people excited. Michelle Rodriguez, who is in a ton of these movies.
Oh yeah,
just a ton of movies. Really deserves a couple movies of her own, but seems like I always remember her as being like the supporting actress as opposed to the main actress. I think that's just kind of her gig. What a lot of people may not realize, what I think was interesting about Resident Evil, because I remember hearing about it at the time, that Sony had actually approached George Romero to write the first script for Resident Evil. And so George Romero wrote it, sent it back to Sony, because they, through PlayStation, they had owned the rights with Resident Evil. I think this may have been, I don't know if this was before Sony Production Company, but either way, it was through PlayStation and all that jazz. Romero sent the script back.
It was after Square Pictures.
Gotcha.
Final Fantasy came out in 2001, and that was their only film.
Nice. But Romero sent it back to them, and they were analyzing the script, and they were like, my God, this is an NC-17 film. Like, there was no way they were ever going to be able to draw it down enough to make it like a PG-13 for them to be able to make money off of it. So they had to scrap Romero's script and completely go with Paul Anderson instead, who Paul Anderson did Mortal Kombat and did some of the other video game adaptations. So they just had him write the script for it. But I've always been curious if you could ever find that Romero script anywhere, like if it's out there for people to get, because I'd be really curious to see, because supposedly he really followed the storyline of the first Resident Evil video game, like to a T followed it. I'd just be curious to see what his take on that one was. But yeah, Resident Evil, it's a fun movie. You know, I say fun, I guess that's a stretch, but I don't know. I enjoyed watching it. Because it was just so stupid. But yeah, you're all going to die down here. It's wonderful.
That's the cool thing with all of these action films is there's just like the comedy section. I think there's just so many to choose from. It's just an endless list. I've actually, you know, well, before we were even talking, you know, I was just going over a bunch of different lists for this one because I was like, man, there's so many to pick from. But the ones that jump out, you know, Over the Top, Gary and I were talking about.
Yeah.
One, honestly, outside of the Rocky movies, that is my favorite Stallone film. I'm going to say it.
Even more than Rambo.
Even more than Rambo. I like it better than Rambo. I really do. I really do. That was, I mean, and see, here's the thing. This is what makes me, that's why I have a little bit of apprehension about admitting to this, because people might now question my choice in films, because it had a very complex storyline. And it was horribly done. The dialogue was really weak. They didn't really build the characters up much. There was nothing special about it. It was just endless. It was just an endless album of rock songs, one after another, but it was still a badass film. It's like when I saw 300 for the first time and I walked out of the theater and I wanted to just go get in a fight with the fucking ticket taker because I could.
Over the Top is basically about a trucker that goes around and does arm wrestling. So a lot of people probably haven't seen that. Yeah.
He fights for and his
some would think a little over the top.
So it's called Over the Top because he wears a baseball cap, and when he's really getting ready to go on the arm wrestling, you turn it around so the brim is in the back. So that's going over the top.
Jesus.
that movie, honest to God, that movie is what made me fall in love with wearing those trucker style hats, like all the ones that I have like in my closet and stuff nowadays, just because Stallone was a badass. Stallone was like Schwarzenegger. He was one of the A-list action stars of the day. And I think that's why we put up with horrible storylines in a lot of action movies, because the fight scenes and the explosions and sometimes the gore and just the characters having their fantastic one-liners.
Yeah.
It's just, it's either you call it the nostalgia factor, you call it makes you just feel like you can conquer the world and you can take down anything, because you know who did Lonely Island, Andy Samberg's band, did that song about guys walking away from explosions behind them and not turning around to look at it, and how badass that looks. They're just walking, they just walk away and you see the explosion in the background and they keep on walking.
Yeah.
You know, there's just something raw and primal about it. That's just awesome. I don't know, man, any Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, you know, Kickboxer, Bloodsport. I loved Bloodsport as a kid.
You like Bloodsport as a kid?
I still love Bloodsport. I think
wasn't he in Street Fighter?
He was in Street Fighter. Yeah. Didn't like Street Fighter as much, but Bloodsport's always been my favorite of his. But yeah, he was in God, Masters of the Universe. We talked about Big Trouble in Little China. And that was one of John Carpenter's, not one of his first films necessarily, one of his middle films, I guess, but it got panned by critics at the beginning. And then actually Rotten Tomatoes went back in a couple years ago because of the huge cult following that it's had. And they redid their reviews and erased all of the old ones. And now they bumped it up to like a 78%, you know.
It only has a 78%.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty quirky, over the top film. Like, you know, it's
another
ridiculous.
movie about a trucker.
Another movie about a trucker, you know?
We should do a whole episode on just trucker movies.
It's just Convoy and Over the Top.
Smokey and the Bandit.
Big Trouble in Little China. And then Smokey and the Bandit. Yeah, 1 and 2. It's funny, if you look at that, all of these movies share Sylvester Stallone, Kurt Russell, I guess not Patrick Swayze. I guess he just. I guess the only big action movie he did was Roadhouse. Yeah, Dirty Dancing and Ghosts. Those are great action movies.
Crimson Dawn.
Yeah.
Crimson Dawn. Okay. Yeah.
Is this you all?
No.
Leading up to you talking about the Expendables. Is this where we're going with this?
No, actually, honestly, I didn't like the Expendables. I didn't like any of them. I thought they were. I just thought they were stupid.
Yeah,
I really did. I was surprised. I was really
supposed to be stupid, right? They were supposed to be tongue in cheek and like, hey, we're going to make fun of this whole thing. At least that's how I took it. But
yeah,
I kind of think those type of action movies were just, they ran their course. You know, they had a good 20, 30 years of being top dog, and then they tried to make them in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and they just kind of ran. It's like when anything, you know, when zombie movies or when superhero movies reach their height and then they plateaued. I think it kind of did that same thing. And I don't know. I mean, I didn't hate them necessarily. I was like, I could have watched something else with my time.
Yeah.
You know, even though Mel Gibson as the antagonist in the second one, third one, do you remember?
I think it was the second one.
Was the second one?
Yeah, because
he was really good. I thought
Bruce Willis was the guy
that
like ran the operation, like in the shadows, wasn't he?
Right.
Mr. Church, I think was his name.
It's been a while since.
And I'm trying to think which one it was where like out of nowhere Chuck Norris showed up.
Yeah.
well, see, that's great.
What would have been really cool is if they just did one where it was like all their most famous characters that they played just got like teleported to this one like arena.
Yeah.
Right.
You know.
Cool.
I'd like to see like John McClane fighting like Conan. I think Conan would beat the shit out of John McClane.
Conan would be, I mean, here's the thing. John McClane, if he had a gun, Conan didn't. He just shoot Conan multiple times.
Yeah, Conan's over. Pretty, he's barbarian, so he gets
but he's
temporary
not a god
hit points.
He's not a demigod
that gives
or
him
anything.
additional. He can move at 40 feet per round.
40. No, this is not a D&D
Dungeons
episode.
and Dragons.
Oh, dude. There's just
that could have been your cheesy movie anyway.
And what about God, I'm just gonna go.
That was a great movie.
It was. I'm just gonna go all day. What about Blade 2 and 3? Those were both awesome. Blade 2 and then Blade Trinity. Those were fantastic.
What's our next topic?
I'm sorry. This is gonna we should just we'll do an episode on just action movies. We actually haven't done that yet. All right, I will move on to our final one. I will go to our final one. Movie musicals. And I think this one I don't understand necessarily. I know a lot of people that hate musicals in general. A lot of people. Gary, I know you do not. And I certainly do not. Michael, I've never actually talked to you about it, so I'm curious to hear your take. What do you think about musicals in general? Not even just necessarily movie musicals. Do you hate them? Are they okay? What do you think?
I guess if I had to use a word, I would say indifferent. I'm not gonna.
Okay, all right.
Like that. Right. I'm entertained by certain ones, but I'm not necessarily gonna seek them out. I guess if that's a way to put it. I think I've seen a handful, but
right. So on movie musicals or musicals that you've seen, the ones that bore you, why do they bore you? Is it the story, or is it just because you're constantly listening to song after song and there's, you know, they kind of all have the same formula? Like why I'm just trying to get into the mind of, you know, of somebody that doesn't love them every time they watch them.
I guess for me, it's if the musical is done in such a way where every time they have a number, it like pulls you out of the story and then you have to go back into it and then pulls you out of the story and you have to go back into it. That gets a little like, come on, like just move forward. I don't need to listen to you sing about this for a couple minutes. But if the musicals that use the song to push the story forward, like something is happening during the song, or it's explaining a transition, or it's explaining, it's almost like a montage. But I like those. I like ones that are like that, not ones that are just like out of left field. Here's a song. Now we're going to come back.
That's an interesting point, because, you know, you say that and I do think about that. I'm like, you know, when you watch the musicals live, a lot of them, Gary, how many would you say? Most musicals have 30, I'd say 30 songs altogether, 12 to 15 in each act normally. Yeah. Some of those are just like Michael was saying, they are filler, and they're just there because it's a musical.
And there's always that one song that's like the fucking slow song.
Yeah.
You're like,
why is it here,
Charlie?
What does this have to do?
Give me a smile. Come on,
move on, damn it! And like every musical, there are some. There's a handful of musicals where people, like Gary and I just, even since high school and stuff, we've been listening to it. I think you grew up listening to them. I grew up listening to them. My grandparents were just huge into it. My mom. So I grew up from a young age too. There are some soundtracks and albums where all of the songs from the show you love, regardless of how mundane they might be and insignificant even. But for the majority of them, there's a lot where you're like, okay, there's, 1 to 3 good songs in this entire show, and the rest could probably just go away.
Yeah.
But I still love it. There's something about that same thing, that whimsical nature that we talked about, where people just break out into song and dance, and the music like gets your feet moving and you want to dance with them. You want to start singing with them. You want to be a part of the cast.
So for the audience members who don't know, Jonny is basically like that one episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer where the musical demon comes in and makes everybody dance. That's Jonny Blackburn in a nutshell.
I will start singing randomly, but you'll do the same thing. You do just as much as I do.
It's our innocent pleasure. What can I say?
Get the hell out of here.
It's our stolen innocence.
Stolen innocence. No, this is not the Lead Feather Cinematic Universe. Stop naming our short films. Stop naming our short films, damn it. Neil would love you for that one, though. I'm still salty.
Great job, Neil.
I'm still salty about not winning more awards with that one. Anyways, we'll talk about that later. Probably not. So I think in general, even to this day, I'll still admit to people that I for sure that I majored in musical theater when I first went to college originally. And even back in the scan, I still love musicals to this day. And I'll sit, and it's not even just like with the recent wave of everybody listening to Hamilton. I think that there was the golden age of movie musicals up until I guess the 60s, I suppose.
Yeah. Sound of Music is pretty much nice cutoff right there. Pretty much.
Yeah. Singing in the Rain was before that. Yeah.
Because then you got like the late 60s, which was not.
Yeah. You had Funny Girl, and you've had obviously
Man of La Mancha.
Rent, and you had Showgirls, and there's obviously Chicago. There's been musicals in the last 60 years. But Hamilton in particular has just, it's made a big dent, and maybe it'll be a renaissance for musicals. I really don't know. It just came out a couple years ago, so only time will tell. But it's been a while, and we've been part of that smaller group of people that still love the classics and still love it when new musicals come out. We'll still we'll go on Pandora or Spotify and listen to the whole album multiple times in a row. But I would get grief from people. Even to this day, I'll get grief from people being like, oh, musicals are just so stupid. They're so unrealistic. Or they're always cheesy no matter
really
what they
realistic
are.
Movie.
Yeah, right.
Like Manchester by the Sea. Yeah.
I like Manchester by the Sea. Get the hell out of here.
I did too, but it's like it's not like a fantastical movie.
Yeah, that's true. But it is, I think, even not just, even on this list, even just by itself, musicals without being a movie musical is something that not a ton of people talk about loving all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a certain group of people that love them.
Absolutely. Sure. Of course. Yeah.
Yes,
and we're
Michael.
part of that group. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like some people
thank you so much.
that love.
Thank you so much. About 1 to 3% of the population. Thank you so much.
Maybe less. Maybe. Gary, what would you say? Just not as far as movie musicals. Let's get a couple in that have been panned by critics or people just talk about in general not liking, not because it's a movie musical, just because they thought it was bad or poorly done. Which is a guilty pleasure for you?
Well, I have a couple that I like musicals a lot. So one of my favorite growing up was Man of La Mancha, which is the musical version of
Don Quixote.
And
a less well-known one, by the way. Not a lot of people have seen that one.
The movie came out in 68 or so, maybe
Was
70.
God, I haven't seen it since high school. Honestly, watched those 2 times, and
it's a good movie, and even the slow song in that movie, which is the Dulcinea, I still like that one. Of course, Don Quixote is a really great story. I believe it's the most widely selling book in the world outside of the Bible, like for the last 400 years. It's a really great musical because it's got a good message to it, and it's got comedy and then like really heartfelt scenes too. Because if you're not familiar with Don Quixote, it's about an older gentleman in the plains of Spain where the rain is, and he's kind of losing his mind, and he dons an old ratty suit of armor and takes his squire out, Sancho, and roughs up a few people at a local inn. And at the end of it, he comes to terms that he is kind of he finds who he remembers who he is, but then at the end he goes back to being Don Quixote, and that's how he kind of dies in the last song. Mm-hmm. But it's great musical. A more modern one that I like that I don't know if a lot of people liked it, so I don't know if I could say guilty pleasure, but
that's exactly what it would be.
Well, I mean, like Enchanted. I don't know a lot of people that the 2007.
Oh yeah, the Amy Adams one. Oh, yeah. Right, James Marsden. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Yeah,
I like that one because it was also Disney satirizing itself, because
that's always fun.
It started off as the cartoon animated, and Amy Adams and
Idina Menzel or James Marsden,
Patrick Dempsey.
Patrick Dempsey also.
All of them did just a really fabulous job in that. And the song that when they're in Central Park, how do you know she loves you, or he loves you, I guess. Yeah. I really enjoyed that as well, and it was a fine musical indeed. And I enjoyed how Disney self-referenced itself and was a little bit self-deprecating as well.
Yeah. In that was, dude, I haven't seen Enchanted in a while, but I did remember fully enjoying it in the theaters. It was also just quite comical, and mm-hmm. You don't usually get that with movie musicals. I was hoping that they would make Book of Mormon into a movie musical at some point, the Trey Parker, Matt Stone one. That we got to see that one live actually, and that was hilarious. But Michael, what about you? What movie musicals are guilty pleasures for you?
So, Book of Mormon, not for the kids, so
no,
don't take the kids to see that.
Not for the children.
Not for the young eyes.
It's not an innocent pleasure.
There's only one musical that comes to mind that I'm like, oh yeah, that's a guilty pleasure. But I'm kind of debating it because I don't necessarily know if it's because I enjoyed the movie, because pretty sure I did. I don't think it's because I enjoyed the movie. I think it's more the memories that are associated with the movie. At the time, we had just moved from one location to another, and I was spending a lot of time over at my cousin's house, my 3 girl cousins that started to grow closer because we holidays and stuff together. But at that time we were spending lots of days together. And I remember this movie had come out recently, and they had recently got it on VHS. So like we were watch it every once in a while, and then it would come on HBO, and just go from there. So it might be that I'm nostalgic for that time, or it might be because I'm like the movie. I'm not sure, but the musical is Spice World, the Spice Girls musical from 1997. I think it was released in North America the next year. But
oh dear God,
yeah, oh dear God. Spice World was a terrible fucking movie, but it was catchy as shit, and it's all about that pop music, right? That the really constant themes, and it's just a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy that everybody loves. Every single one of these songs that are coming out because they're all catchy, but like it's got a ton of people in this movie that you never would have thought of. Like Alan Cumming is in the movie, Roger Moore is in the movie. Fucking Meatloaf is in this movie. Like
Roger Moore, really?
Yes, Roger Moore is in the movie. He's like the main.
I don't remember that at all.
I wouldn't call him the villain guy, but technically that's the role he's playing. He's almost the opposite of the Bond. He's the evil villain guy. He's either that or the producer, one of the two, but it could be the same thing at this point. But like Meatloaf is the bus driver, and there's just all this, all these folks in this movie you never would have thought of. But obviously it's going through their most popular songs at the time and trying to make something of a story out of it, but the story doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I really think what they were trying to do was make Moonwalker, and failed really, really badly. Because like Moonwalker, I don't think was ever intended to be like a full on, which I guess is another really terrible musical movie that's probably a guilty pleasure for some folks. But it was just like kind of a collection of music videos is how I always saw Moonwalker, and it wasn't necessarily meant to be anything else.
Yeah.
Spice World tried to do that, but then tried to have a storyline that was really not great. It also had the controversy that it had the guy who got caught with child porn, like right before the movie came out. And he had a thing. Oh. What was that guy's name? He was a pop.
Jared from Subway?
No, Jared was not in that movie.
Stephen Collins, is that?
No, that may have been
not the guy from Seventh Heaven
name, but it was like a pop star from Britain who had a big single out in like the 60s or 70s. I think his name was like Gary Glitter, something like that. But
all right.
There's a song in it that they do where it's like leader of the gang. I'm the leader of the gang, something along those lines, that it's not a Spice Girls song technically, like it was somebody else's and they had done it. And so it's kind of weird sitting in the middle of this rando movie where all of a sudden the guys come out and they're in assless chaps dancing around. Well, originally Gary Glitter was in the movie and had filmed a scene of him with them out there singing that song, which is why all these guys in assless chaps show up. But a couple of days before that movie came out, I'm pretty sure he got arrested on child porn charges. So they had to, like, not long before the movie was released either, I want to say like a week or two, and they had to quickly edit him out of that movie after they had shipped all of that crap out there. It was just kind of crazy, but I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it's because I liked the movie or it's because I'm nostalgic for the time that I was watching it, but it's the only one that really popped into my mind as a guilty pleasure one, because I'd watch it again.
What's your favorite song from it?
Can you sing it?
Of the gang. Yeah. No, I'm not singing.
The hero of the gang. The leader of the pack.
Yeah.
That's it.
Is that really the song?
No, that is not really the song.
Yeah.
No, Gary's. I
don't know. You said it was not a Spice Girls song.
Oh, okay. God, that is one I actually never saw.
You don't say.
You don't say.
The guy who studied musical theater never saw Spice World.
Never saw Spice World. Oh. My grandmother actually gave me the option of seeing that or
Braveheart.
No.
Dragonheart.
No. I can't remember what the other option was, but I told her I didn't feel comfortable seeing it because I wasn't. Yeah. I didn't know about that. I because it was. I wasn't like huge into the Spice Girls. Like I knew they were around. Like there were a lot of friends of mine in the neighborhood that listened to their CDs and stuff. I was more of a Backstreet Boys fan. Yeah, I told her I wasn't comfortable seeing it for some reason. I can't remember. Anyways, sorry, it's 3 a.m. and I can't remember the remainder of that story.
Backstreet Boys are the ones that are like, I want it that way.
Yes. You are my fire, the one desire. Believe when I say I want it that way.
Tell me why
ain't nothing but a heart. Tell me why ain't nothing but a mistake. Tell me why I never wanna hear you say I want it that way. All right, we won't make Michael's ears bleed anymore. Yeah, it's. I wish I could name a bunch of movie musicals that I don't like, because this is one that it's kind of a subgenre on its own where I don't necessarily talk about it a ton because not a lot of people love movie musicals. There's obviously, like we said, there's a sect of society that does.
Well, let me ask you this question then, Johnny. So for a lot of the movie musicals that take music from like bands, like Across the Universe took a bunch of the Beatles songs, and then Moulin Rouge took a bunch of different songs. Sure. I think that I think that they tend to start off strong generally, and then the last half of the movie is much weaker than the first half. Do you find that to be the case as well?
Absolutely, and it's only for the movies like Michael was mentioning with Spice World, Across the Universe, whatever. It's only those movies that base their entire soundtrack on an album that a band did. If it's an actual movie musical, if it's Sound of Music, Singing in the
like
Rain,
if it's a musical movie,
that is typically strong for me personally, all the way from start to finish, depending on which one it is. But yeah, I would totally agree with you. I thought La La Land was a very good movie, I thought, but as far as a movie musical,
it was Best Picture of the Year for 20 seconds.
For 20, yeah. Thanks a lot, Warren Beatty, or the stagehand that fucked it up. But as far as if you're comparing it to the greatest movie musicals of all time, I don't think it doesn't stand a chance. I don't think I wouldn't throw it in my top 20.
And I guess that's
because Ryan Gosling, his attempt at singing and dancing was just awful. Emma Stone did a great job.
Yeah.
His attempt was just god awful. It was painful to watch, and I like him too, which is the sad thing.
Yeah. I guess that's because they typically have like a really good idea. They're like, oh, this would be a great idea to take all these songs and make a musical movie out of them.
Right.
And then as they start the process, they start off really strong, and then like halfway through, they're like, well, geez Louise, how do we work this song in here? Let's just, I don't care. Just put it in there.
Right.
I imagine that's how the process goes a lot of the times.
Probably. Yeah. God, as far as the ones that were a guilty pleasure, there was one I talked about earlier. It was called From Justin to Kelly. Granted, I haven't seen this since I was a teenager, but I watched it with my cousins religiously. It's that same thing. We were into the Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen movies because of how bad they were. We were into this one, not necessarily knowing it was going to be bad because we were 13, 14. But it was basically Kelly Clarkson, who you all know, and then was the winner of the initial American Idol competition, and then Justin Guarini was the runner-up. And as you might know him from those Dr. Pepper commercials where he plays Lil Pepper or whatever, the guy that's like, Dr. Pepper, it's the sweet one. That's what he's known for nowadays. Didn't do quite as well, but they basically
he did not.
They inked a movie deal together where they were essentially, it was a modern day, a 2000s version of Grease, essentially, just without them meeting up at school. It was just them having a summer fling, essentially, two conflicting worlds, and they meet at the beach, and their storylines, they try to piece it together, but it didn't make a lot of sense. It was a teen flick for sure. But we were just so obsessed with American Idol at the time because it had just come on in the early 2000s, and it was such a worldwide phenomenon. And we got swept up and saw the movie. And at the end of it, my youngest cousin, it was my cousin Chrissy, and she would have been probably only 8 at that point, 7 or 8. And she was like, wow, this is stupid. Okay, well, she's not 3. This is stupid, mommy. She said something along the lines of, well, that was bad. She's like, that was horrible. And if a 7, 8-year-old can figure that out, yeah, it's a horrible film. But we still saw it multiple times after that.
Multiple times.
We watched it that weekend that they were in town. I think we watched it 5 times.
This is a terrible movie. Let's watch it for 10 hours.
It again. That's great. As a kid, I used to act out scenes in movies that I really loved.
You still do?
I do?
Yeah.
I quote them. I don't act them
when
out.
you're asleep.
Okay. Yeah. And I know you watch me when I sleep.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah. At least it's not as bad as you waking me up in the middle of the night when you're sleepwalking to do your shadow puppet shows.
I gotta do my shadow puppets.
Shadow
people
puppet
have
shows.
to see that.
We'll get into that in another episode. All right, guys, we are winding down for tonight's episode. Let's go ahead and go to picks for the week. Let's try to stick to the topic at hand, movies that you wouldn't recommend to anybody normally. Gary, I'm going to let you start us off this week. What is your recommendation for our listeners?
Well, thank you, Johnny. Mine is it's kind of a movie, but it's also like an instructional video. It's from the 80s. It's called Surviving Edged Weapons. And
wait, what? Hang on a second. Where did you find this?
I heard about it on one of the Red Letter Media shows.
Okay, yes, I should have figured. All right.
You can find it on the YouTubes, and it's
the YouTubes. You can find it on the Facebook.
On the Facebook. It's a really it's informative and kind of cool because it was like a training video for police. It's like an hour and a half long, but it also has like these scenarios about how to survive combat with like, you know, edged weapons.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of
like,
interesting.
being stabbed, and like this one guy gets like stabbed in the chest, and so he takes like a credit card and puts it over his wound so his lung doesn't collapse, and it's really a lot of fun.
Okay.
It's good for kids and you
Yeah,
know, old people.
great for children.
I think the comparison they made was like it's basically on the same level as Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, it is phenomenally good. Like I highly recommend it. Nobody will have ever seen that, and it's got really good production value actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's my recommendation: Surviving Edged Weapons.
Not bad. Okay. All right, Michael.
My recommendation for the week comes straight from Father Sky, Mother Earth, and your dear old Uncle Tony. Little 1995 film that's already been mentioned tonight called Heavyweights. It is it's technically a kid's movie, but it's about this kid who goes to a fat camp that's run by Ben Stiller. And it's basically Ben Stiller's character from Dodgeball instead running a kids camp.
Except it's not White Goodman.
I mean, that's exactly it. But it's just, there's a lot of just great lines in it. There's a lot of great one-off, you know, just quips. It's got a lot of the same kids that were in Mighty Ducks because it was still that, I'm pretty sure it's a Disney movie, Heavyweights. Yeah, it is. And it's got a lot of those same kids in it. So it was around that same time. In fact, this may have been one of the last ones they did because it was 95. So they were starting to get a little too old for Disney.
Jesus, Michael.
Yeah. But surprisingly enough, like there's Paul Feig is in that movie, if I remember correctly, as one of the camp counselors. Really? Yeah, like the tall, lanky guy. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Paul Feig's in that movie. This is just a fun movie. And it's Ben Stiller takes it over the top. And just all of his little lines in there. And there's this great scene at the end where he's like smashing a bunch of glasses on the ground and walking through it barefoot for no reason whatsoever. Like zero reason. He's trying to prove a point, but it doesn't make sense. Like, it's fantastic. Go take a look. It's pretty good. You could probably find it on YouTube for free. Not gonna lie.
I bet you probably could actually.
You have been a good servant to your queen.
Loyal. Fair. I'd like to reward you with this Hershey kiss. Like perfectly crafted Hershey kiss out of nowhere as he's sitting in a jail cell. Like it's so stupid.
I'm gonna go a little further away from where you guys are at, I suppose.
Probably a good choice.
This choice is still not a good movie. I rewatched the Last Dance again, the Michael Jordan and Chicago Bulls documentary, which is highly recommend in general if you haven't seen it. Just a good documentary. You don't have to be a basketball fan. It's just very interesting, the whole story that they all go through.
Is that what he said?
No, The Last Dance.
Oh, I was like, it was The Last Dance, that one like really crappy.
Yeah, Julia Stiles or something.
It was,
old like late 90s film.
Became like okay.
Black Swan?
Black Swan. Save the last swan.
Because of that, I was just thinking about the other day, and we were talking about Jean-Claude Van Damme. My favorite Dennis Rodman role. It's a action buddy cop movie. It's called Double Team. Okay, it's a 97 action thriller essentially with Dennis Rodman and Jean-Claude Van Damme. It's a hot piece of garbage. But it's just entertaining as hell. It combines the wonderful mixed martial arts of Jean-Claude Van Damme, the attempted acting style of Dennis Rodman. He's trying to copy Shaq, I guess. I don't know.
In Kazam, not Shazam.
Mandela effect.
Yep.
Rodman certainly tried to have his own movie career. It certainly did not pan out as well as Shaq's did. Steel is another one that I could recommend. Loved that, by the way. Did you ever see that?
Yeah.
I like Steel.
Where he gets like the mechanical
plays
suit.
John Steel. Yeah, I mean he's an action hero.
Does he have that giant hammer? Right.
He does.
Yep.
Yeah, and it has like mini missiles that come out of the bottom. It's a steel sledgehammer basically.
Yeah, I mean Shaq's a big guy. If he hits you with a steel sledgehammer, it's gonna hurt.
This is certainly a movie that would be so bad it's good for sure. Both of them actually, Steel and Double Team, both. They're just both fantastic. At the end of cheesy action films. They're like towards the end of the 90s anyways. And they kind of were wrapping up that era of, the 70s to late 90s. Cheesy action films that we know and love. So yeah, check them out if you're really drunk one night and lonely or something. I don't know, and just by yourself and you're tired of talking to a wall. And
how did we not have cheesy superhero movies as one of our genres?
yeah, that could have been a good one.
Oh man, Meteor Man, right there. That's
Meteor
my choice.
Man, that's a good one.
Man.
That's a good one.
Blank Man.
Yep.
Yeah, that's another good one. Could have talked about Ghost Dad.
Ghost Dad.
Yeah, I mean, fuck Bill Cosby, but still, that was an entertaining.
I think
movie.
that was. Never mind. Okay.
That's not what I meant. I meant I don't like Bill Cosby. God, shut up, Gary. You know what I meant. Anyways, Michael, thank you again so much for joining us. Always a pleasure having you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Gary, pleasure having you. Hopefully, you won't be back next time.
No, we'll see. We'll see. My contract's almost up.
Yeah, it is, and I know that you'll want to talk about your innocent pleasures.
Yes,
again. For Neil,
Gary,
and Johnny, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week. Take it easy. Thank you for tuning in to Lead Feather Productions' podcast of I Don't Give a Flick. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode. Podcasts are available on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, and everywhere podcasts are hosted. I Don't Give a Flick is hosted and produced by Johnny Blackburn, Gary Elmore, and Neil Riley. Executive producer Johnny Blackburn, technical director, editor, and audio mixer Gary Elmore. I Don't Give a Flick is a Lead Feather production. Copyright Lead Feather Productions 2021.